So panel 1 is entitled Gendered Religious Authority and Female Preaching. I will briefly introduce our panelists today. And so we have 3 presenters. The first presenter is Ahmad Subhi Mustafa. He's a graduate teaching assistant in the Religious Studies Department at the University of Kansas and a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science at the University of Kansas. He earned his master's degree in religious studies from the University of Kansas. He was a Fulbrighter, and he holds a master's degree in Islamic studies from Al-Azhar University, specializing in medieval exegesis. He's also a researcher and a senior translator at the Al-Azhar Observatory for Combating Extremism in Cairo, Egypt. His interest in research includes Islamic studies, Islamic law, religious political discourse in the Middle East, comparative politics, international relations, and radical group discourses. So that's the first presenter, and myself also. I am Asmaa Benbaba. I'm an Arabic lecturer of Islamic studies. My research interests revolve around the big areas of women representations in cultural forms, in cinema from the African and Arab world. I'm also interested in anything that is educational from the classroom and beyond. I'm interested in communities of online communities in that help reach out to the students and how we measure their learning within communities like technological communities and like Canvas and other technological communities, and also how to transmit ideas of women representations in classroom and beyond. The second presenter is Binyamin Lawal. He's from Freie Universität Berlin. He's a doctoral researcher, and his work focuses on Islam in Africa, Muslim women religious authority, female preaching, Islamic education, and contemporary religious movements in northern Nigeria. And our third presenter is Safina Garba Isa. She is an independent scholar. She's a researcher whose work focuses on Islam and gender in northern Nigeria. She has particular interest in Muslim women religious authority, female preaching, Islamic education, and gendered religious practices in contemporary Hausa Muslim societies. Please join me into welcoming our presenters today. Yes. So we start with Ahmad Subhi Mustafa and myself. I think there's a way. This is the main picture. Oh. Oh. These are mine. Those types of art.
Oh, where is your
Oh.
Thank you so much for having us today. I am so honored to have the opportunity to work with Dr. Asmaa Benbaba on this research, and I'm part of this conference that I feel it's an honor to be part from Azhar, but also part from University of Kansas. So thank you so much. Our research today is female preachers in Egypt and Morocco. So technically, it's a comparison between how the female preachers started in Egypt and Morocco, how the style they are using, the themes and the content. And the agenda for our presentation is going to be first background and context, and then we're going to talk about theoretical framework that we're going from, and the secularization paradox. Then we'll talk about especially Morocco and Morshidat, and why there is different names, as you see, Morshidat in Morocco, and then Egypt Wa'idat in Egypt, and finally the comparative analysis and conclusion for our paper. So the main question that I think our paper is trying to analyze and understand and have an answer for is why the Egyptian and Moroccan governments wanted to institutionalize female preachers or female section in the religious institutions, and how this was an instrument for counterterrorism, and is that giving them enough genuine responses from the audience or not, and the analysis or understanding how being related to an institution and having agency is going in the same in the simultaneous direction. In Morocco, they called Morshidat, so it means female spiritual guides, and they are related from the they are working under the Ministry of Islamic Affairs since 2006. And Wa'idat in Egypt, the female religious preachers, that's the means of Wa'idha. Al-Azhar Research Academy, this is the umbrella that they are working underneath, and established 2015. The program, how they became or how they institutionalized the female preachers in both countries. So the context is very important to understand how they emerged. In Morocco, as we see, 2003, it was the Casablanca bombings. Many people were killed, and there was a claim from the government or monarchy about how we can have immune from the religious institution. 2003 to 2005, comprehensive reform, trying to understand how we can reform mosques and religious places, so we can have the spiritual security. And then 2006, when we see the Murshidat program started under the King Mohammed V in Rabat. In Egypt, in the other side, we have the Egyptian Revolution, 2011 to 2013. And after 2013, we have the removal of Muslim Brother government. Al-Azhar had to engage in that time to have a counter-terrorism narrative. 2014, we know that ISIS emerged, and this was very important time for everybody because it's caliphate. So for Muslims, caliphate, it's a good thing. And then we have a very bad thing that we see in the ground, how the religious institution should respond to that, because probably 99% of Muslims around the world will say, this is not a caliphate, this is not Islam. So how we have a counter narrative that is very important. In 2014, as we see that Dabiq or many of the ISIS magazines, Rumeyya and Dabiq, they use female narratives, they use female voices, they use this narrative. So it wasn't something that is absent. It was in the narrative of these groups. So Al-Azhar 2015 had formally established the female preacher division or Wa'izat at the time, plus many things. Many of them, for sure, is the Al-Azhar Observatory for Combating Extremism that has now a female leader, as we listen to Dr. Riham. As we see here, that ISIS used the narrative and the women propaganda because in their understanding, they were building a state. It was not just a group like Qaeda, for example. It was, they are building a state. So to build a state, that means that you need female. And female was used not just to recruit them, but also to recruit men. So you have a life, you can come here. So we see here that they have Al-Khansa Brigade. It's a female unit. So they have from the beginning, they established female fighters, and they saying that they are controlling the female because there are segregation at their narrative. So they had stories from the sisters in the magazines. They targeting female, but also how they are targeting people from the male part to engage and come, because we have a lot of females here as well. We have life, and they are trying to have this propaganda in many publications that they had. Okay, so how our paper is analyzing the comparison, it's coming from the theoretical point of three main themes. The first theme is about the state religion management, that female preachers, the religious institutions, as Dr. Ziegel claimed, that religious institutions actually do not simply yield to the state power, but they negotiate, adopt, contest, and female preachers are part of this negotiation and contest sometimes with the state religion relationship. Dr. Saba Mahmoud and Layla Ahmad as well, in the second theme, they are understanding that women patriarchal in the religious structure can actually have their agency. It's not just something that they have to protest or contest against the patriarchal understanding. They have their own agency in this understanding of the piety or the being pious. The third theme that we are analyzing our murshidat and wa'idat comparison in Egypt and Morocco is the securitization theory. How and when the state have this institutionalization of female preachers as a counterterrorism. They reveal it above ordinary policy, but simultaneously subordinate women's autonomy and security imperatives. So, for example, you have the wa'idat. We're not talking here, for example, about Al-Azhar Observatory for Combating Extremism, because it was obvious it was established for that reason. But we're talking about wa'idat who goes underneath preaching, only preaching. How they go. Are they engaging actually in the narrative of security and terrorism? No, they mostly go in the normal preaching about tahara or about rulings or about. So this is focused more on preaching, while they were actually established from one of the reasons the state made it was a counter-terrorism. So how this produces the central paradox in both programs. Now we're going to move to the securitization paradox that I just talked about, and Dr. Asmaa will lead from now.
Shukran, Ahmed. Thank you, Ahmed. So what is the paradox? So the logic is women are undermined by the same laws that supposed to protect them or elevate them. So securitization or security logic is both enable women to access the sphere, the public sphere of being having access to religious sphere, meaning like gaining access to the platforms, gain credentials, build a community of trust, and having a pastoral role, being also leaders in their own communities formally, but at the same time they are constrained and limited by the number of topics that they can discuss within groups of women students. The narrative. Why? Because they are tied to some state endorsements and patriarchal religious structures. So it is the same logic that empowers them, and at the same time defines the terms on which their authority is restricted as well. So it's very important to know who are the group that we are going to talk to you about. So the Morshidat, the case in Morocco, they are certified by the Moroccan Ministry of Islamic Affairs to provide religious counsel. So the first cohort, they graduated in 2006, and as Ahmad mentions, all of these were encouraged by the events that happened in 2003, the bombing that happened in Casablanca 2003. So they graduate from an institute called Mohammed VI Institute. The number was really big, so 50 graduates per year. This was an intensive 12-month program. They sit side by side in the classrooms with their friends or their other students who are the imams. They receive the same formal training, program training. The program include classes they have to pass classes in Islamic studies, they have to pass classes in sociology, psychology, and law, and Quran. The imam have, according to the training program, the imams, they have to memorize the full Quran. While the Murshida, they have to memorize half of it, according to the classes that they attend, the program. So explicitly, women were Murshidat women, they were prohibited from leading mixed gender prayer or issuing fatwa. They serve in mosques, as the picture shows. They serve in hospitals. They serve in prisons, orphanage. They serve, they reach women, other women in rural areas that cannot access information. So Murshidat, they were caught between two ideas, liberal feminism ideas and Islamic feminism ideas. So why liberal feminists believe that being a Murshida, this is a big step towards, it's innovative, towards like achieving gender equality in Morocco, accessing the field, a field, religious sphere that was predominantly male for a long time. But Murshidat as a program, the Murshidat structurally promotes state agenda and not autonomous female goals. So agency is undermined by control, by institutional control. As for Islamic feminists in Morocco, it's the idea of Islamic feminism is empowerment through mastery and redeployment of religious structures, not resisting them. So Murshidat, they actually, so Islamic feminists, they think that Murshidat, they interpret sacred text and reformed Mudawwana, they reshaped pedagogy from within. So, but they stay in harmony with the state control. The result is negotiated authority and persistent constraints. Go ahead.
So in Egypt, Wa'idat, as we see, the history is a little bit different. In Azhar institution, as Professor Salama says, that it's not something that it's just emerged. So 1962, the first time that Al-Azhar established a faculty only for women as inclusion. So that was not something like when 2013 happened and then 2015 happened and trying to establish the wa'idat or the female preachers in Al-Azhar, they were already cadres or people who are already in positions everywhere in Al-Azhar. So they didn't actually try to have programs for them. They already there is already faculties or people that they are in positions, or there are colleges for women, on females, in Islamic studies and in languages in Al-Azhar. So it started 1962, 13 the removal of Muslim brothers, 14 ISIS, 15 the Wa'idat established, and then it took at least for 40 years that when the Grand Imam decided, okay, we have been having these female preachers without a female director. So 19, when Dr. Irham Shaheen was appointed as the deputy of Islamic Research Academy to have the first woman in that position to facilitate the women's section at that time. And 21, when they launched the magazine of Wa'idat, so it was a special magazine that they issue. And I discovered recently that Al-Azhar has a very famous magazine that has been for decades. So now they have, they call it a Rukn al-Wa'idat, a corner for female preachers in this male or patriarchal, if we're gonna use this term, magazine. So they have under Dr. Irham, the same director of the female preachers. This is the as we see here, this is the part of Wa'idat corner in the Al-Azhar magazine. So they already issue these things, and I try to analyze what they are engaging in. So we will see here that they have a section for female-centered pedagogy. They have a section called Bab Allim Tiflak, which means teach your child. So they focus on how we can raise education for our kids. They have also contemporary challenges. So the very interesting that I see that 2 months ago, they issued AI at the Kalisnai as Examind. So it's Dr. Ilham and her team, they started to understand how we can use AI, what is the impact of AI. That's agency in my understanding that they are engaging in another topics. It's not just only about female. They have kind of, I will say, that very conservative, contested jurisprudential issues. So, for example, when she arguing that the verse in one of the articles, that the verse that talks about female testimony, it's not for everywhere or everything. Sometimes it's not just in it's a limited situation. When Allah asked one male testimony, it has to be with two females testimony witnesses in the court. So she says that this is not a feminist rejection, but an intra-jurisprudential reinterpretation, that she's focusing that this is not something new. It has been said by a lot of scholars, and she is reinforcing that we can use that, and Al-Azhar agree about that for sure. To publish that in Al-Azhar magazine, that means they agree about that. And the fourth topic, I saw the values formation and the social ethics, like normal preaching about love, about tolerance, so they have a section to talk about for public. And I myself was lucky to have interview with Dr. Ilham Shaheen, and she told me that many times her audience is not just female. When she teaches at the University of Al-Azhar or some events, she has probably like 90% males in front of her, and as she is teaching about Islam, she has the authority to speak about, or as Harry scholar, not as a female scholar. So now, when I was trying to see how the reach in Al-Azhar female preachers is very low. Like sometimes I see hundreds or 500 views in their videos that is published in Facebook or YouTube. And I want to remind you that here we're talking only about preachers. We're not talking about fatwa, female mufti, or we're not talking about Al-Azhar Observatory. We focus only in our research in that, because we're going to have tomorrow more about this. Like I myself will present a paper about how the comparison between the media outreach that female preachers and beside those who are not affiliated with Al-Azhar tomorrow. And my colleague as well, Dr. Fahmi, he's presenting about fatwa, female mufti, or female people that they are experts in fatwa, and how the reach is different. As soon as we're talking about the preaching in general, so I see a very big gap between the reach as institutional female preachers versus those who are independent preacher. Like in the right, this is an independent female preacher with 4.6 million subscribers in her YouTube channel. Okay, so now this is a comparison.
Yeah.
A comparison side by side between the Murshidat and Arvat.
Yes, shukran, Ahmed. It's very important to see how the dimensions, like different dimensions, and what difference it make between Morocco and Egypt. So the founding year between in Morocco 2006 and 2015. The catalyst that influences the birth of this category of Morshidat or Wa'izat. So the events of Casablanca 2003 and the MB Outser in 2013 and ISIS 2014. The governing body, the same governing body, almost. Meaning like they share the same ideas. The entry requirements, both, I think, so for Morocco, BA in students Morshidat, they need a BA in Islamic or Arabic studies. They were recruited directly from the university. Also, the same thing applies in Egypt, Azhar Islamic graduates from Azhar Islamic Studies. The training in Morocco, it was a clear 1 year, 12 months shared with imams. And in Egypt, it's a postgraduate preparation. It's just named differently. Authority, it's none in Morocco. And in Egypt, it's limited. Leadership, no mixed gender. In Morocco, I remember I have seen a couple of in 2003, between 2003 and 2008, I think I encountered a lot of formal and informal news on this, on leadership and imam. For example, I remember this news. It was online at that time. The online magazines or online newspaper were few in Morocco, but I remember this title, and it was in bold. I was in my 20s. I was in Morocco, and it says المرشدات لا الوعد وليس الإمامة. I remember this title. Al-Murshidat meaning counseling and not leadership. Preaching style. So in Morocco, it's dialogical, it's pastoral, it's counseling. It's there is a mixture of layers. This is how I will put it. A mixture of layers that was not very clear in the training. And I'm looking at the training from an educational point of view. And this is what I'm doing with Ahmad. We are looking at different forms. Publication, non-identified, and in Egypt, Majallat al-Wa'idat. And I will tell you the difference between Morocco and Egypt. So let's talk cinema. Cinema started in Egypt. So when I say cinema, I'm taking the part that we need for today. Cinema, or like diffusing films from Egypt. So everybody in the past, the 20s and the 30s, immigrate to Egypt to be a singer or to be an actor and all of that, which means the voice. It means the voice. So that's why there is a lack of voice in this area in Morocco, because it's North Africa. And if we want to be singers or like our voice being heard in the arts or the seventh arts, we have to immigrate to Egypt, which things are connected. Because when I talk about cinema, I talk about diffusion of the image, diffusion of the voice. Next.
So this is one of the most important for me slide, because you see part to part. Here you see the wa'idha, the murshidat, and here you see the wa'idha. What can you see in the wa'idhat in Egypt is very obvious here. The dress code means institutions. This is not something by mistake. This is I'm a witness of that they were discussing. As Azhari Sheikh Fahmi, for example, this is the formal Azhari suit for males. They were like, should we just leave them without a dress code or have a dress code? And they finalized like, no, we need a dress code. So they known are as wa'idat or female preachers from an institution. They are not independent. So when they go anywhere as a wa'idha, as a female preacher, they have to wear that, a pink headscarf with a black or like a suit or something like as you see. In different occasions, everywhere they have to have this dress of code. And this means that the institutionalization in Azhar was way advanced, but also more controlling, because they have to have a very certain topics, they have to have a very certain organization, they have to have certain code. In the wa'idat, you can see, you didn't even know who's speaker, like the speakers are very similar to who are in the masjid. They are very from that's why it's more intimate, more community assigned. I don't say that the wa'idat in Egypt, they don't go to the masjids or mosques or and clubs, they go. But they obviously show themselves as an institution's image. And this is very important. So in Al-Azhar part, in the right side in Egypt, you will see scholarly authority, Al-Azhar certified. They had their own magazine. They reach out with a certain look, with authority from the organization or the institution, which is Al-Azhar. So this is important. And return back to Saba Mahmoud. In Saba Mahmoud's understanding how agency works. So, for example, in two cases here about hijab and about non-imamate, that why women cannot lead the prayer with men and male and females. So for liberal or secular liberal reading, they will see hijab as patriarchal imposed, or seeing non-imamate for mixed gender by female as barrier that has been sealing over women. In Saba's Mahmoud theory, that I argue that most of women in Muslim world and here in America, they argue the same now. They say this is our agency, because the agency here in the Islamic literature, it's not patriarchal or feminine, it's from the scripture. So it's because Allah says that I have to wear the hijab that I'm wearing hijab. So I don't, like we have here, mashallah, people with hijab on. Any of you has been oppressed to wear hijab? We are in America, you don't need to. So the wearing the hijab in this understanding is kind of their agency, that I can wear the hijab or not. And I heard this analogy many times from preachers. They say the hijab for me is like a control, because I don't need to wear the hijab with certain people, and I have limited hijab with other people, and with foreigners I have full hijab. So it's like a control over my body, what I should show for people or not. So this is a kind of a scriptural agency, not a female agency in preachers, and this has been informed. Or for the imamate, why women doesn't lead a woman cannot lead the prayer because of the scripture, not because she has been oppressed by males. So this is very important to have the framework from Saba Mahmoud and understand how women preachers arguing in the same way about their agency that comes from the scripture, not because of the I know that we had too much, so I want to just jump over. Like, this is on the left, this how the framework that they are both have, but in the key differences about the dress code, about the how the lectures going, the authority, and at the end the paper is talking about the main themes, that the state cooptation, how female was cooptation inside the states, and it was institutionalized as a counterterrorism. But also we have the security paradox that, okay, the logic that opens the sphere for them, they are okay to go, but they are limiting their ability to engage in these topics. Negotiating authority, as we see how female preachers are, they are neither instrument nor fully autonomous. They don't have their own autonomy place without institution. They have an institution that you go through, but they are also have their debate what, like seeing Dr. Ilham going from just only female topics to talk about AI in a magazine that is published for everybody is interesting to see. And the open question that we end our paper with is their agency real or not? So if it's yes, but with walls that has the program and has the institution over them to negotiate and try to understand as well. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Binyamin. Lawal Abdul Ghani, presenting on alternative space. I have to make some clarification. This is a research at a preliminary stage where I'm trying to still gather data on this topic. So it's still very, it's still at the early age. So in this presentation, I'm going to present how female faring outside the university and inside the university. And I would like to begin with an anecdote of a daughter of a sheikh by the name Zainab. She's the daughter of one sheikh in northern Nigeria. And around 2021, Malama Zainab bint Ja'far, the daughter of the famous Salafi scholar who was assassinated in 2007 by the name Sheikh Ja'far Mahmoud Adam, and a graduate of Islamic University Medina, was on the limelight, especially on social media. He has just been announced as the leader of Nisa Sunnah in Kano State, the women wing of Jama'atu Izalatul Bid'ah wa Iqamatus Sunnah, Society for the Removal of Innovation and Establishment of Prophetic Tradition. This organization is an organization that is a revival organization that preach that Muslim has to go back to the prophet, to the period of the prophet in terms of the way they practice religion. This organization is popularly known as Izala. She was announced in this gathering, in the grand gathering, which was attended by the leader of the organization, Sheikh Balalo. And because of the presence of Sheikh Balalo, this gathering attracts so much attention. With this role, the role as a leader, and the visibility she got through her preaching in the Hausa language, there are these two developments, that is leadership position and visible preaching, were the major factors which brought her to the limelight. Her popularity owes much to the criticism by her detractors. They criticize her and the Izala organization for giving her leadership position. They claim, that is, her detractors and those who are criticizing her, they claim that as a woman, she is not supposed to take the leadership role, as this is against what they call the Islamic injunction, which requires women to remain at home. More than their criticism on her leadership role, they further reviled her when she began to conduct Ramadan oral tafsir, a mainly men-dominated space, where she explained the meaning of the verses of Quran to female audience. They argue that as a female, her voice is aura. That is the part you are supposed to close, not to allow people to see or hear. And therefore she should not be heard by unrelated men. Second, that Quran tafsir is the responsibility of the men, and women should not be found doing it. Now, the case of Zainab, the daughter of Sheikh Jafar, is not the focus of this paper, nor similar cases. But I began with her anecdotes so as to give the picture of females' life in most of the northern society in contrast to their life on campuses. Female in northern Nigeria are expected to remain at home and not be heard in the public. That is, in most cases. They are supposed not to display ostensible visibility. The university environment, on the other hand, is in clear contrast to the above description. Therefore, a family which sends its female to the university is displaying a subtle rebellion to this social expectation. One of my interlocutors, a young lady, Aisha, in her early 30s, explained that explained the encounters of her parents with her uncles and aunties when her parents expressed their interest in sending her and her female siblings to the university. Our eldest sister, the first daughter, absorbed the most difficulty when my father decided to send her to the University of Jos. She explained. Our relatives warned my father that your daughter will lose her chastity and will not get husband, or if she got, she will disrespect her husband if she attend higher institution. Their advice was assertive, but our father stood his ground, Aisha recounted. In communal societies, this form of negotiation is common, and it can even determine or shape the future career of children. A person is not living only as individual, but living for the society. Aisha, the third girl in the family to attend university, added that she is happy that her father did not succumb to the pressure of his family, and as a result of his resistance, they had smooth education, and she is now the proud graduate of English education. Now, unlike the off campus society, female students have to be included in male student alongside male students in almost all intellectual, political, and religious affairs on campus. That is the contrast between the outside campus society, and the society in the campus. That female alongside male, they are also um, considered in all posts, intellectually, politically, and on religious affairs. Although men control campus politics, females can vie for the office of vice president and other essential offices. In the Muslim religious realm, some females hold leadership positions such as Amira, and they oversee females' affairs on campus and a representative of the da'wah. So they can play the role of the Amira, the head of the female on the campus, and they can also be a representative of the da'wah committee. So she is a form of a da'iyah. These female leaders are the point of contact and reference by influential individuals, and they represent the female folk on major events inside and outside the university. One of the major activities embarked upon by the female leaders is taking the role of preachers. A female Muslim zoology student from the southern part of Nigeria explained that one of her early encounters with female preaching on campus was through the Amira at her university on a Friday before the Imam's khutbah. She later discovered that, unlike the off campus, it is a tradition that females use the time before khutbah to address the female folk. So on campus, even on the podium, where the imam is supposed to preach to people, there are female who are assigned, who are given the space to address, especially the female folk. which is something that is not done outside the university, which make the university environment an alternative space for the female folk. When I asked her about the topic of the preaching, she replied it was on taqwa, piety. Female preachers have a number of topics they preach, ranging from piety-driven topics to advice on academics. Example of topics the females discussed was a topic shared with me by Malama bint Uthman, a university lecturer with the Department of Islamic Studies, Federal University, Kashiri, and was delivered during the Sisters Hijab Day last year, that is 2025. The topic is hijab, more than a cloth, symbol of identity, dignity, and devotion. Sisters Hijab Day is one of the annual programs held by the female across Nigerian campuses. Bintu Uthman further explained that there was a presentation by a male last year, something they will change this year, 2026, so that it will be a program for females only. This is an example of efforts by females uh, that shows that females are not only gaining visibility but dominating programs on the university campuses. This also underscores what Abdullahi Sunai referred to as female intervention in public sector, which has deconstructed and restructured the traditional modes of construction of authority within many African Muslim society. What I found interesting is not only the topics, but most importantly, how females emerge to become preachers. Beyond showing dedication in religious programs, which is one of the things a preacher is expected to have, females preacher, female preachers have to show at least above average academic performance and be outspoken. A female who is intending to become a preacher should be outspoken, something that is not very welcome outside the university. Rather than being criticized for being outspoken, like the case of Malama Zainab, who preached outside the university in Hausa language, the outspokenness of a preacher on campus will give her better recognition among her peers. I would like to conclude by saying in this work, I drew from the experience of female students to show how they take charge of their agency beyond suggesting an alternative space. This work seeks to present alternative way of viewing the females, not as subordinated, but people with agency. Therefore, the work will indicate alternative ways in which females negotiate and contest subordinated positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. We move to our third presenter in this panel this morning, Safina, Garba, Isa.
So, good morning to you, and it's evening here. So, good morning, good evening to those on the same time zone as myself. The title of my paper is Historicizing the Muslim Female Preaching Voice in Northern Nigeria. Now, the first quarter of the 21st century has seen a global increase in the rise of the Muslim female preacher, and this was brought about by about three reasons. The first one being the extension of global discourses, which led to reinterpretations of certain Islamic tenets and new forms of interpretations in Islam. The second has been state-sponsored Islamic preaching programs in places like North Africa and Indonesia. And the third has been the rise in digital technology, which brought about the influx of female Muslim preaching voices, because like the previous speaker said, especially in the North, women were expected more to be seen but not heard. So the rise in digital technology gave women that opportunity to actually air their voices even without being in public physical places. Now, this paper is an exercise in historicization and scholarly rigor. It traces back to the 17th century. From the time of the Prophet, it follows the arc of classical Islamic rise and the medieval times through the transfer of Islamic manuscripts and teachings to the Western Sudan, North Africa, and the specific conditions of northern Nigeria. The paper asks, has the Muslim female preaching voice had a transformative impact on ijtihad, Islamic legal formation, and Islamic feminist discourse in northern Nigeria's core Muslim north? And at the beginning, we start with the prophetic foundation, where Islam itself began in the 17th century. And at the apex of this period is Aisha bint Abu Bakr, who transmitted over 2,000 hadith, corrected senior male companions, and taught both men and women. Aisha's participation in the preaching of Islam during the time of the Prophet ﷺ is significant because it proves that as early as that time, it was okay, it was allowed to hear the female voice in issues of Islamic teaching. It also proved that the base of knowledge, which was the Prophet ﷺ, was accessible to both males and females. And contrary to the misunderstanding that Muslim women are barred from acquiring education, they're barred from interaction in the public spaces, Aisha's role in preaching and the fact that she taught many companions that came after her proved this to be wrong. Other female companions of the Prophet of significance in this time were Darda al-Sugra, who taught hadith in the mosques of Damascus and Jerusalem, and the Caliph Abdul Malik was a student of hers. Then there are the wives of the Prophet of Islam, Salama, Hafsa bint Umar, Zainab bint Jash. All of them transmitted hadith and issued legal opinions. This proves that as far back as the 7th century, female authority rested on knowledge, not gender. And women's homes in Mecca and Medina functioned as centers of religious instruction and legal consultation. Following the 7th century came the classical and medieval period. During the classical period saw the consolidation of Islamic legal thought and the formation of the 4 schools of Islamic legal law. And with this came the medieval period in which there was a rise in women scholars, both teachers and preachers. Of fame is the 8,000 women scholars recorded in Islamic history, specifically of the Al-Muhaddithat tradition. According to Nadwi in his book Al-Muhaddithat, learned women enjoyed high public standing and authority in the formative years of Islam. For centuries thereafter, women traveled intensively for religious knowledge and routinely attended the most prestigious mosques and madrasas across the Islamic world. This meant that as far back as the classical and medieval period, women were actively engaged in the seeking of Islamic knowledge and its dissemination. Examples of such women include Fatima bint Sa'ad al-Khair, who taught in Cairo, and students in her classes included leading male scholars of the era. Zainab bint al-Kamal of Damascus, who held over 4,000 ijazas and attracted international students. And this led to, after this medieval period, came the transfer of Islamic manuscripts and knowledge through the trans-Saharan route. The trans-Saharan route started from the 9th to the 10th century. During this time, Berber traders, Tuareg scholars, and itinerant clerics carried Islam southward along trans-Saharan routes into the Sahel. while from the 14th to 15th century, Islam became the religion of ruling classes in empires such as the Mali Empire, the Shanghai Empire, and the Hausa city-states of Kano, Katsina, Zaria, Gobir, and Daura in northern Nigeria. There is also the Timbuktu link with the Sankore Mosque University and its scholarly households, with deep ties to the Hausa world, which included women who transmitted hadith and religious knowledge. Wilkes says that the same network of trade that carried goods across the Sahara also carried manuscripts, scholars, and the institutional forms of Islamic learning. Within the Hausa states, during the pre-jihad tradition of female religious engagement, Hausa courts, that is the ruling courts in Hausa states, patronized Islamic scholarship. Women of ruling and scholarly families received Islamic education in the domestic sphere. The Qadiriya Sufi order also provided a framework for female piety and female religious authority. And notably, the jihadists who would bring about a reestablishment of Islam in the Hausa states was from the Qadiriya Sufi order. However, the pre-jihad period was characterized by syncretic practice and also a certain exclusion of women from serious religious education. This meant that women were not allowed to be engaged in ijtihad or to pass Islamic legal rulings. And this is part of the problem that galvanized Sheikh Usman Danfodio's reform. And this exclusion also became the central charge in the reform literatures of the Sokoto Jihad movement. The Sokoto Jihad and the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate is considered to be the golden age of Islamic scholarship in pre-colonial Nigeria. Usman Danfodio, the jihadist who brought about this change, declared women's religious ignorance as a moral crisis of pre-jihad Hausa states. Women's right and duty to Islamic education as a theological imperative was emphasized, and his jihad created institutional conditions for female religious authority. And at the apex of this female religious authority was his daughter, Nana Asmaa, who was a poet, a scholar, a teacher, and who wrote in Arabic, Hausa, and Fulfulde. She created the Jaji system, which trained women teachers to reach rural communities. And she founded the Ntaru, which was a mobile female religious education network that went into the hinterland to teach women about religious laws. And her scholarly output remains without parallel in West African history. And she is considered to be significant in the rise of the female preaching voice, because the Jaji system and the Ntaru, which she founded, provided the first structured system of Islamic knowledge dissemination among women. The Sokoto Caliphate, the most sustained institutional affirmation of female religious authority in the history, is considered to be the most sustained institutional affirmation of female religious authority in the history of northern Nigeria. Sorry, just a minute. After the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate came the colonial disruption, which was brought about by the imposition of British colonial rule in northern Nigeria. This started at the beginning of the 19th century and lasted for 6 years, from 1900 to 1906. The British indirect rule preserved the emirate system in modified form, but with lasting negative consequences for female religious authority. Western-style secular education was reserved almost exclusively for men, creating a gendered educational bifurcation that reinforced male advantage in formal learning. And this went counter-grain to what the Sokoto Caliphate, the jihad of Uthman Danfodio and Nana Asmau's Jaji system had sought to correct. By creating a system of education that was gendered, it meant that females were excluded from this system of education. Expansion of Islamic courts under British administration formalized and ossified male-dominated jurisprudence, reducing scope for informal female religious authority. And as a result of this, the structured Jaji network of Nana Asma'u gradually attenuated as caliphate supports weakened and had no successor in the colonial period. However, despite all of that, there was a persistence of the female preaching voice in informal gatherings, in houses of learned women who came together to share knowledge, to exchange Islamic knowledge. However, this system was not structured and it was not formalized. After the colonial rule came After the colonial rule came the Sharia era with its paradox and opportunities. The Sharia era was actually a byproduct of the pre-colonial era, which saw, among other things, the Sharia era was a byproduct of the pre-colonial period, which saw, among other things, a rise in education among women. A new generation of Muslim females began to emerge, which was educated firmly in Western education and also in the Islamic system of education. Also, students exchange and also religious learning in countries like Egypt, Sudan, and Saudi Arabia brought about a network and exchange of Islamic ideas from northern Nigeria to these parts of North Africa and the world. In 1999, 12 northern states adopted Sharia criminal law between 1999 and 2002. And this raised new questions about women's public religious roles. There was a formalization of Islamic institutions with the establishment of the Hizbah, the Sharia courts, which reinforced male dominance of formal religious structures on the one hand. However, new social demands for female religious guidance could not be met by these male scholars alone. And issues of women's legal questions such as marriage, divorce, inheritance created captive audiences for female preachers and gave rise to a new demand for the female preaching voice. It is within this period that notable female Muslim preachers in northern Nigeria began to emerge. Dr. Zahra Muhammad Umar of Bayero University, Kano, who started Ramadan Tafsir in Hausa, both in audio and video recordings, reached thousands beyond public spaces. She was appointed female commander of Kano State Hizbah Board in an attempt to include a female voice in the board, and the Sharia framework itself created unprecedented formal space for female authority. Later on, she was appointed Commissioner of Women Affairs and Social Development, and this, coupled with her position at the State Hizbah Board and also her programs on radio and video, gave her a wider coverage for dissemination of Islamic knowledge from a female point of view. The digital media and the transformation of the preaching landscape, which covers the contemporary female preaching voice in present-day northern Nigeria. The rise in digital technology provided platforms that bypass traditional male gatekeepers to allow female preaching voices to reach audiences of hundreds of thousands. For example, Malama Zahra Muhammad with her tafsir that was carried out both in audio and video forms, Malama Zainab Jafar Adam, daughter of Sheikh Jafar, first female Ramadan tafsir, who started the first female Ramadan tafsir at the mosque in Kano, and which sparked nationwide digital debate. I think this was mentioned by the previous speaker. So this was kind of transformative for the female preaching voice. The very act of a woman being in a mosque and carrying out the tafsir, which had for years been a male domain, was transformative and it was pivotal. And it brought about a rise in the female preaching voice in northern Nigeria. There is also Malama Juwairiya Usman Suleiman of Bauchi State, who has a large following through digital first Islamic content on women's empowerment. Then there is also Mariam Limu, the daughter of Aisha and Sheikh Limu, who through her digital platforms such as Sisterly, her NTA Ramadan shows, her YouTube series, and her global podcast bridges traditional institutions with modern contemporary digital reach. Her Islamic dissemination, her dissemination of Islamic knowledge, whether in public spaces or on digital spaces, is always a combination of the traditional and the modern. Regarding ijtihad, legal formation, and the limits of authority, contemporary female preachers operate within the Maliki tradition. They teach, exhort, and interpret, but rarely claim the mantle of mujtahida, that is independent juristic reasoning. And this is something that has been common right from the time of Nana Asma'u of the Sokoto Caliphate. Although very prominent, and although her Jaji system and the Entaru system was revolutionary, she, however, nonetheless still existed within a circumnavigated male domain. Her father, being the sheikh, gave her a certain leverage, and also being married to the vizier, and also having a brother who was also a sultan. All of these were factors that led to her having an advantage in being able to carry out the activities which she carried out. However, her activities were still within the male patriarchal Islamic circumference, and she did not give any independent juristic reasoning of her own or carry out any ijtihad. In family law, marriage, divorce, inheritance, however, female preachers articulate women's rights in ways that implicitly challenge patriarchal interpretations. While not outwardly, however, within cultural contexts and also within individuated personal contexts, Muslim female preachers have disseminated Islamic knowledge in ways that can be seen as implicitly challenging certain patriarchal interpretations. This also goes for their interpretive choices, which hadith to foreground, which Quranic themes to emphasize. All of these can be seen to constitute a form of informal ijtihad. Example of these female preachers include Hajjaj Likisu Yusuf, who had a nationally circulated newspaper column advancing Islamic interpretations centering women's agency, sustained Islamic hermeneutics without the title of being a jurist. Formal legal formation, however, remains male-dominated. Female preachers are seen as communicators and educators rather than formal jurists. However, teaching women their rights is real and consequential, even if formally unrecognized. While these women do not have the position of jurists, they do not carry out ijtihad nor bring about legal Islamic rules and formations. They, however, find ways of teaching women their rights, making them understand the nuances of Islamic legal rulings, which can be applied in individual cases. Islamic Feminist Discourse and the Muslim Female Preaching Voice in Northern Nigeria. Many Northern Nigerian female preachers reject the label feminism, yet the substance of what they communicate aligns with its core concerns. Aisha Lemu, for instance, women's full participation in religious knowledge as a theological imperative, not a concession to modernity. This is her opinion, and this is consonant with Islamic feminism without the vocabulary or the tag. Hajja Bilkisu Yusuf, who sees Islamic law entitling women to rights that patriarchal custom suppresses. And this is a form of feminist hermeneutics from within the tradition. This gap between practice and nomenclature is itself significant. It shows that local idioms carry feminist credentials within themselves. Challenges and opportunities. The challenges which continue to face the Muslim female preaching voice in northern Nigeria include persistence of patriarchal structures within Islamic institutions, social pressures on women exercising public religious expression, digital platforms which become vectors of harassment and policing, as was experienced by Dr. Zainab Jafar when she first started tafsir during Ramadan in a mosque. The Boko Haram insurgency, devastating consequences for education and community life, directly targeted women in public religious roles. Maintaining community legitimacy while pushing established boundaries. All of these are challenges that continue to face, that the female preaching voice in northern Nigeria continues to face. However, there are also opportunities, and these include expanding education, which has produced a generation with high-level scholarly formation, digital platforms, which have created new audiences and possibilities beyond the immediate community, global conversation on the Muslim female preaching voice, which provides intellectual resources and solidarity, the sheer fact of presence, female preaching voices becoming visible, audible, and increasingly numerous. And lastly, but not the least, the weight of a 1,400-year tradition behind every woman who steps forward to preach. In conclusion, the Muslim female preaching voice in northern Nigeria is a tradition that is still writing itself. It is not a recent invention. It reaches from Aisha in 7th century Medina through Nana Asma'u's Jaji system to Maryam Lemu's global podcast, an unbroken if contested thread. On ijtihad, the female preachers have exercised informal interpretive authority, significant though not yet transformative at the level of formal jurisprudence. On legal formation, practical legal education, teaching women their rights in marriage, divorce, inheritance, has had real consequences, even without formal recognition. On Islamic feminism, or its substitute, the Muslim female preaching voice in northern Nigeria has continued to carry out a brand of feminism without the label. This form of feminism is rooted in the prophetic tradition, carried in local idioms, and needing no external validation. The movement matters for the women who lead it, for the communities whose religious lives it shapes, and for the broader project of understanding what Islam in Africa has been, is, and might yet become. Thank you.